And welcome back. We told you earlier on the show about the Pay for Slay program, lifetime salaries handed out by the Palestinian Authority to terrorists and their families. Wouldn't it be great to see these payments end and make sure that your taxpayer dollars are not used to reward terror? Well, this is just one of many issues that CUFI's legislative arm is drawing attention to on Capitol Hill. CUFI Action Fund Chairwoman Sandra Hagee Parker joined me to talk about the fight against Pay for Slay and much more. Take a look. Tell us, number one, what we are doing in Washington, D.C., and how our influence is growing in our nation's capital every day through the Action Fund.
Sure. What our Washington office does is, it reminds our leaders that Christians United for Israel is a sharpened spear, and the Washington office is a spearhead. It holds our leaders accountable. It lets them know that our membership is a strong voice that should be heard and should be reckoned with, and that our members are ready to act. Going after Israel and the Jewish state is the new brand of anti-Semitism. Oh, yeah. And now the euphemism is anti-Zionism, or, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist. It's a political movement. But you know what? It's the same strategy to isolate, to delegitimize, and we are there to be, like your show, watchmen on the walls, and to say that never again and not on our watch.
And the BDS narrative, Sandy, you make a great point. It's just the destruction of Israel by other means.
Exactly. So instead of using bombs or weapons, we're going to, it's actually very ingenious if you think about it, because it's insidious, it's sneaky. What the BDS movement wants to do is to invest our American tax dollars with companies that do participate in boycott, divest, and sanction. Exactly. And so it's making our funds an instrument of anti-Semitism.
It's so crucial for CUFI to have that strong presence in our nation's capitals, in the halls of power, where, Sandy, we're actually affecting legislation. Speaking with one voice, nearly 4 million members, we are actually moving hearts and minds in the halls of Congress. Talk about that a bit, how our influence is really growing.
It is, Eric. On the BDS front, CUFI has been instrumental in getting 24 different bills passed on the state level, while we're working on the federal bill to say, well, we're going to fight this battle individually in each state.
So, Sandy, just real quick, so that's basically banning this whole movement, boycott, divest from, sanction Israel.
What it does exactly is to say, okay, for instance, the state of Texas. The state of Texas says that if you don't do business with Israel because you are a BDS company, then we, the state of Texas, are not going to do business with you. And so you're free to continue to engage in BDS. Texas is not going to stop you from doing that. But Texas is going to say, if that's your position with Israel, then you don't get to do business with us. And so 24 states have passed similar legislation across this nation, and that's wonderful. CUFI is also involved with the Taylor Force Act. We've also been involved, exactly, very important legislation, the AntiSemitism Awareness Act.
Taylor Force, long story short, American military veteran, butchered by a Palestinian terrorist in Israel back in 2016. Give us a little more background on Taylor Force, the Taylor Force Act, and why it's so important, why we are behind it here at CUFI and the CUFI Action Fund.
Sure. The reason why this act is named after him is because the terrorists who perpetrated this crime against Taylor receive a stipend from their government.
From the Palestinian Authority, Israel's supposed partner for peace, Mahmoud Abbas and the PA.
Yes, and so it's basically pay to slay. And, they try to guise it as a legitimate welfare system. But, the longer you're in jail, the bigger that paycheck is.
You are set for life.
You're set for life. The bigger the crime, the bigger the prize. Your family gets benefits. You get a salary in prison. You are celebrated. And so the Taylor Force Act says, okay, the United States gives foreign aid to the Palestinian Authority. And we are not going to give our foreign aid to any of these welfare programs that are really just fronts for pay to slay, for terrorists that are killing our citizens.
I want to ask you, too, about your recent testimony on Capitol Hill. We actually have a clip right now of you testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. Let's take a look at that real quick.
Anti-Semitism is not a Jewish issue, it is a human issue. Jewish identity and ancestry continue to be a target, whether one is male or female, conservative or liberal, religious or agnostic. History has already shown us what happens when good men and women do nothing in the face of such evils. Not to act is to act. Thank you for your consideration and your time.
Now, Sandy, I was there in the audience. You did a great job. You did us proud. Talk a little bit more about that testimony, why it was so important, and why it's so important for the CUFI Action Fund to be behind the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act.
What the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act does is on college campuses, there has been an increasing amount of anti-Semitic behavior towards students. And under Title VI, Jewish students are protected from harassment predicated on being Jewish. And the interesting thing is, although we've seen this increase in anti-Semitism on campus, the Title VI is being used for prosecution of 0 cases for these students who have experienced this type of harassment.
So there's no recompense for them. They're being persecuted, harassed, and that's that. They complain about it, and...
So the interesting thing is, what the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act does is it essentially is saying, well, you're not prosecuting these cases, so it's one of 2 things. You either don't know what anti-Semitism is when you see it, or you're ignoring it. So we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that it's because it's hard for them to identify what anti-Semitism is. So the interesting thing is the United States State Department already has in law a definition of anti-Semitism. And we use it to keep track of anti-Semitism globally.
It's a perfect template, you would think.
It is exactly that. And so what we're saying is, why don't we hold ourselves to the same standard? The Department of Education use the definition for anti-Semitism that's already been codified by the Department of State. And when you have harassment that appears to be based on somebody's Jewishness on college campuses, consider the definition.
And Sandy, as you said, our brave CUFI students are literally going into the lion's den, and they are being harassed for standing up with their Jewish classmates and standing up for Israel on campus.
That's right. They're the front lines. Our college campuses are the front lines. I said it in my testimony, and I'll say it again. The lessons that you learn in the classroom are going to be the policies in the public square tomorrow.
Sandy, last question. You have so much going on right now. You're juggling different cases, different legislation on Capitol Hill. What's big for you coming up in 2018? What is the CUFI Action Fund looking towards? Is there any big initiative we should know about for the coming year?
Well, obviously, CUFI and the Action Fund want to really focus on the Taylor Force Act and making sure that that gets seen all the way through and signed into law. Any type of legislation or effort that is going to continue to take our tax dollars and weaponize that against our friends Israel and against ultimately us, we're going to say no.
The Action Fund is holding them accountable. Sandy, thanks so much. Keep
Thank
up the great
you,
work.
Erick.
Thanks for being with us today. Big thanks to Sandra and the CUFI Action Fund team for all their great work for Israel in Washington, D.C. Well, up next, we head to Israel's border with Gaza to hear how Hamas is not the only threat to Israel's south. Our good friend Avi Melamed is back with some very important information. Don't move.